This is Siddharth Alwalia. Welcome to the 100x Entrepreneur Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Prime Venture Partners, an early stage VC fund led by Amit Somani, Sripati Acharya, and Sanjay Swami. Prime is often the first institutional investor in category creating tech startups in fintech, SaaS, healthcare, and education, such as EasyTap, MyGate, and SignUp. To know more about Prime, visit primevp.in. Today we have with us Aloke Bajpai, co-founder and CEO of India's largest travel search engine, exigo, which has today built itself into a multi-travel platform including air, rail, and other commodities on travel. Alok, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Alok, we'd love to know from you, the current size of exigo and what domains it spans into.
Sure. So, exigo currently, serves more than 150 million Indians a year, through various travel platforms that we've built. You know, we started off as a meta search engine for travel in the early years, and over time evolved into a marketplace and then an OTA. So, as of last year, exigo has become a transactional platform that also provides utility services across a bunch of train, flight, bus, hotel verticals. And I think our biggest USP has been that we've built this company very organically, and have kind of grown largely by word of mouth, and what we call $0 marketing. So we are very proud to have disrupted the category by proving that you can build a large travel app, primarily on product and content.
Alok, Ixigo is known for its quirky videos, which have hundreds of millions of views, and I believe that's one of the key components of your branding and marketing, the organic reach of your videos.
Hmm. Yeah, so we've been doing that now for almost 5 years. I think now we have a lot of scale, for most of the videos that we launch. But the insight is that nobody likes to see ads, and that's an insight we understood. As soon as social started growing, that content gets shared on social because it's either informative or inspirational or quirky or humorous, right? So we chanced upon that in the travel domain because travel has so much, to offer in terms of experience, that you can build a lot of quirky content around things related to travel. And we started doing this like 5 years back when we hired, Ashish, who heads this team now. And over time, this has grown into like our single biggest, marketing area, right, internally, where we spend a lot of time researching, iterating these videos. Most of these have been seen by, almost all Indians. I would say, many of them have gone viral even in the US.
Yeah, one of the key ones which I remember still fresh in my mind is what not to pick up from a hotel.
Yes, so that one, I think it was timed very well. Moment marketing, as they say. There was this incident in Bali where, this Indian family was, caught taking out certain things from the hotel room that they were not supposed to, and I think there was a lot of negative flag coming in, and people were sharing that across, the world, and we figured out that, look, maybe people don't even realize that there are some things you can take from a hotel in a legit manner, and there are others that you cannot. Why not educate everyone? So we, in fact, we refurbished some content that we already had for this occasion, and we launched it within a matter of hours of this that episode going viral, and it kind of hit it across the world, right? So we got featured in some TV shows in the US. Organically, a lot of TV channels in India carried this video organically, right? So I think that was definitely a high moment for our marketing team.
And Alok, it's been, I believe, 14 years now of building Ixigo, right?
That is correct. So we started working on the idea in late 2006, and we launched Sigo in June 2007. So from launch, it's been 13 years. From the idea stage, it's been 14.
Wonderful. And Financial Express last year reported, Ixigo had revenues of almost 113.5 crores, and the gross transaction value is 1584 crores. That's phenomenal. Uh,
So
Alok.
those numbers actually are our FY19 numbers. So in FY20, and we haven't really published these yet, but in FY20 we grew to 160 crores in revenue with very negligible losses. In fact, we had a profitable for last quarter of the year, which was JFM 2020. And in terms of GMV, we were very close to a 400 million annualized GMV. At the time the year closed, and then of course COVID hit us and hit everyone else in the industry.
Yes. And how are the various platforms of exigo right now doing after COVID? Or still we are in middle, very much middle of the pandemic right now, but things have opened up.
Yes, so I'm a believer that there is no post-COVID. There is basically a pre-COVID and an in-COVID world because this thing is going to be around for a while. We'll learn to live with it. We will learn to get vaccinated from it, and there would always be certain precautions in the next few years. So what we've seen is that obviously when it started in March, when the lockdowns were announced, we went down to near zero revenue for a couple of months because there were hardly any transactions happening. I think what is interesting is Ixigo started out on both flights and trains as a content and utility platform, right? So on flights, we were a meta search engine. You could search where the best deals are on our platform, whether they were on other OTAs or on airline sites. We would bring them for you. On trains, we started out as the best place for getting accurate PNR status predictions, train running status, schedules, routes, platform numbers. All the meta information that you need for trains. So by the vintage of starting out as a meta platform, we got a lot of traffic which was non-transactional over time. Like we were at the top of the funnel, right? So what we saw is that many people used to come to Ixigo for information, right? And then over time, we became more transactional and started converting many of these people on our own platform. When the lockdown happened, some of the informational users still kept coming because they were wondering, like, what happens to their bookings that they already have for future dates. When will the lockdown be lifted? And then when the lockdown was lifted, people were curious whether they need some state e-passes or there are quarantines or not. So I think we were very busy during that time collating all this information and creating what has now become our COVID center, where we disseminate all the COVID relevant information. And that's something we launched during the lockdown. We also launched a product called Ixigo Assured, which allows people to get full refunds. The biggest anxiety was, now that lockdowns have happened, will I get a refund on that booking that's lying there for April, right? And there were millions of customers, not able to reach airline or OTA call centers. Thankfully, we just built this AI chatbot called Tara, which was handling almost 80% of our queries as of March. And that was very useful during this crisis because suddenly we had like a 8x outreach to our chats and calls. And much of this tech actually saved us, and much of the informational stuff we had kept some traffic coming. In fact, during the lockdown, we still had almost 30-40% of our traffic still salvaged despite no transactions happening. And as soon as things opened, I think we saw people coming back. There is a large number of people who need to travel because of a reason that they cannot avoid. What we call utility travel or urgent travel, emergency travel, and also just to get closer to friends and family, to get to a safer place and things like that. So thankfully, we've seen month on month, growth in bookings since the lockdown has been lifted, and I think the worst is behind us. Hopefully, that's what we feel, and we are looking up to the Shera Diwali when bookings usually do start to happen, and people do tend to want to be closer to family.
Yeah, and I believe everybody in the world is itching to travel again. It's been a long period of hiatus. So I think the best time, the worst is over, and the best time is yet to come, where those who have been, confounded to the life of work from home will step out.
Yeah, indeed. So
Alok,
I think there are two camps. I remember that Brian Chesky from Airbnb said that travel as we know it is over. But I think few weeks back he said he's going to IPO later this year. So I think my sense is that there is a period which I think we are in right now, where because there is no vaccine, because there is lack of consistent guidelines and regulations. Different countries have different sort of regulations with respect to quarantines and visas, etc. And then within the country also, different states have different guidelines. I think till the period of uncertainty exists, we may see leisure travel continue to be impacted, and corporate travel. Obviously, people are getting used to doing Zoom calls and Google Meets. So I think we've seen some impact there. But my sense is that, look, when things actually do come back to normal, people are going to travel with a vengeance, because, like you said, most people have been sitting at home. The people who are continuing in their jobs and who have meaningful incomes, their savings have actually gone up, right? And it's reflected in the stock market momentum as well. Like people have people have realized they're not spending on eating out, on travel, and it's, they have money accumulating, and they're saving it for that great travel bounce back, as they call it, which we expect will happen, within 6 to 12 months from now. And that's the time when we just have to make sure that we are prepared for. And and I think most travel companies right now are going through this hiatus where we are saying, look, we just need to survive and continue to be relevant for whatever portion of demand has come back. But you also need to be preparing and building, for that big bounce back, which is inevitable.
Yes, and currently Airbnb is seeing, uh, you know, more revenues through less number of bookings because people are booking months for work from, beach locations rather than working from home. So I think that the way travel is bouncing back is phenomenal, especially the likes how Airbnb has demonstrated, and the current plans of going to IPO in such pandemic for a
Yes, I
travel
think
company.
even in India, as of last month, we've seen workation type, trips being planned, like longer term stays, especially to states which have started to open up. So you have Goa, you have Himachal, you have even Karnataka now, opening up where there's no quarantine requirement, etc. per se, unless you are symptomatic. So I think we will see, especially with the environment where companies are saying, look, you can work from home till December or till March, right? In that environment, if you want to get away from the mundane life at home, which I think most people have cabin fever now, I think the only way you can do it is to find yourself an isolated hill chalet overlooking nice view of the Himalayas, or perhaps an nice beach hut, someplace along the beach side. And why not quarantine yourself, or live your next few months there? And many people are actually starting to look at that as a real possibility, right? Because I think in terms of psychological productivity slash stress, right? I think people are reaching a breaking point, and many people are getting burnt out, right? Because there's no boundary between when you're working and when you're not. And people want to have a real vacation, but what you can do in a workation is that you could set your boundaries and enjoy that destination as well. So I think that's something we'll see a lot of in the next 1 year.
So, Alok, you have been through the 2008 2009 economic crisis. How was that? How did you survive that? And any lessons learned during which you have been building the company in the last 13 years from that?
It's quite a story, actually. So what happened back then was we were just a 2-year-old business, bootstrapped. We'd raised a small seed round early 2008. So we just started hiring and building a bigger team. And then we had also closed or signed a term sheet, right, with a large VC investor. The due diligence and the docs were done, and then the Lehman Brothers crisis happened, right, and our term sheet got pulled, and we couldn't close that round. We were left in a lurch, and it was quite evident that we wouldn't be able to raise money for a bit because obviously the funding had dried up suddenly end of 2008, early 2009. So we reached a point where we had like a couple of months, maybe 3 months of cash left in the bank, and no visibility on when the funding environment would improve. Obviously, that time we had very little revenues to rely on. I mean, obviously we could grow them, but then there wasn't any runway. So we did this huddle with the team, which was about 25 people back then, and we were very transparent and said, "Look, here's the situation. We don't have a lot of money in the bank. There's not going to be any new capital coming in, and our revenues are not that great. So there's two scenarios: either we fold or we find a way to survive." And the unanimous vote in the room, or unanimous voice in the room, essentially was that we need to find ways to survive. And one of the junior engineers got up and said, "So what are our costs? Let's work this out on a whiteboard." And me and Rajneesh, we were very transparent and said, "Look, here's how much we pay for rent. Here's how much we pay for servers and salary spend, which was like 80% of our cost, right?" So he's like, "Why can't everybody work without salaries for the next few months and we will be profitable, right? Because we make enough revenues to cover our rent and server costs." And I was like, "Dude, that's unsustainable, right?" And then we figured out, we could work out a formula where progressively, like we could have a salary cut and then progressively bring it back as revenue start coming back. So everyone went to, like at least half their pay being cut. The founders obviously went to zero, and the leadership team, the 2 or 3 senior people, took a deeper pay cut, and we survived for the next 9-10 months with just that funding that we had, till the point our revenues actually grew to start covering the previous salaries again. And we gave ESOPs to the team, and many of those people made money on those ESOPs in the subsequent rounds of funding. So I think it was quite a story, because all the people who were there, all 25 of them, actually stuck around with us for almost 3 years post that crisis. Many of those people actually went on to become entrepreneurs, and I'm not surprised, because if you've been through these kind of moments, you can build the resilience required to do your own thing, right? And I think this time it was different, because even though the way we handled it was similar, because the knee jerk reaction would have been, large crisis coming, travel is going to get disrupted for a long time, let's start figuring out who becomes redundant. But I think, again, this time we were 150 people. We had a leadership team of 12 people. We went into a call, and we said, "Look, what do we do? What are the options?" We built the scenarios, and we said, "Look, in the worst case, if it's really over for travel, then no matter what we do right now, then the worst case scenario is something that you will always lead to the worst case outcome. But let's plan for the most likely case." And the most likely case, we said, was 3 to 6 months without revenue, and then progressively coming back, within a year or year and a half, back to where you were before. And for that case, we didn't actually need to let go people. We just had to reduce our costs, right? So we worked out day and out in how to reduce our variable costs. We renegotiated our leases with the landlords. We renegotiated almost every expense item of ours. And then on the salary side, we had people agree to voluntary pay cuts. So most people actually agree to let go, 30-40% of their pay. I think for the people who earned more than a certain level, they even agreed to a 60 to 80% pay cut. The leadership team, essentially, and obviously founders were the first to say, "Look, we are not going to draw any pay till things get back to normal." So, we did that back in March, just before the lockdown. In fact, we had preempted the lockdown already, and we had taken all these measures and announced them, just a week before the lockdown actually happened, because we could see it coming. And, thankfully, we got back to a level where we could revert those salaries in July itself. So, we've reverted everyone's salaries in July. And we've actually also given everyone ESOPs. So now, we gave away about 2.3% of the company in July, right from the peon to everyone in our leadership team. Everyone owns shares. and these were given at a deep discount so that everybody benefits when things bounce back.
That's phenomenal, Alok. You have set a phenomenal example. And doing a revenue of 160 crores with just 150 people is very much unheard of in Indian startup ecosystem. Uh, I would say, in US, there's a norm that Google's and the likes do a million per employee in revenue. But doing that in India is phenomenal. So you had plans of going public before COVID anytime soon?
Look, I think just pre-COVID, when we turned profitable, we did discuss that internally. That I think the best path for this company looks like it can go public, because when you're making significant, and we are talking about crores of profit that has started coming in, every quarter. We said, look, it makes sense to chart a map towards an IPO. Obviously, we are recalibrating that right now. Although, what we can tell you is that even this financial year, we are pretty confident will end on a profitable note, despite COVID and things bouncing back, because we managed to improve our unit economics. The traffic is bouncing back very well. So as of yesterday, we've crossed 60% of our pre-COVID traffic and transactions, and across, if we take cumulative transactions, and it looks like we should be back, to where we were pre-COVID, possibly by the end of this financial year. And therefore, we are saying maybe 2 to 3 years is what it will take from here to be sizable enough to think of a public offering. But it definitely seems like the kind of uh, outcome which this company can have, given what we've managed to build with very little capital. Not just on the revenue per employee metric. Let me tell you something interesting. I mean, the amount of primary capital that Ixigo has raised in the last 13 years is just $22 million, right? Most of the players in our category spend more than that, in a quarter, just on marketing, or at least were doing that pre-COVID, right? But that's the total raise we've had till date, right? So I think, on the revenue divided by total capital raised metric, we would be in the top five companies in India. I'm pretty confident of that.
Astounding. And I believe through your journey, even your team has learned, frugality, entrepreneurship, surviving in crisis. It's reported that out of every 10 employees, one employee from Ixigo has turned out to be an entrepreneur. How did you and Rajneesh build this culture?
It's actually two now. I mean, we did this math again last month, and we figured out that 20% of our past employees are entrepreneurs, and there's quite a few companies, and I can name a few here. Where if you look at Sprinkler, if you look at Unicommerce, if you look at Fleetex, bunch of companies that are doing well or that have done well. Some of them have even built and sold already. Some of them are raising their next round. So I think it's very interesting that these companies have come out of, and I'm talking about the entire management team of these companies. Literally coming out of Ixigo, right? And I think one thing we think that has really helped, and that is what helped us as well, because these are the same people who worked for us for many years, is that we have a culture that's built on resilience, and which is built on doing things in a different way, right? So when you have well-funded incumbents in a category, right, I think it's easier to kind of give up the battle and do something else, right? And there were many points in our journey where we couldn't see the end of the road, right? And I think one thing we have done, which was pretty unique, is every time we've gone back to the drawing board and reinvented ourselves, right? And I think that's one thing, which I feel is very unique to our culture and the kind of people we've ended up creating, because they have a never say die kind of attitude, and they will go and change the game, if they can't win the game. So and I think that's very unique, to create your own blue ocean, to create your own uh, you know uh, playground, and your own playbook, because you can't win any battle by the incumbent's playbook. you have to create your new playbook that the incumbent cannot play by, right? That's the only way small company can actually disrupt a space where you already have dominant players.
So, Alok, can you share, in the last 13 years of your journey, uh, those moments which pushed Ixigo into a higher orbit?
Yeah, so I think uh, I think the maxim that never waste a good crisis applies to us, because we've had several crises in the past, and 2008 was just one of them. But there were several moments in our journey where we didn't have visibility beyond the next 6 months, right? And in terms of either capital, or in terms of whether something would work. And I think if I had to share some anecdotes, right? I think the ability to challenge the status quo and to find solutions that may be more relevant for the customer, that's something we've built through the process of hiring for empathy, right? So one of the core cultural values at Ixigo is empathy, right? And it's easier said than tested, right, when you're hiring people. But I think over time, that's something we've put a lot of weightage on internally. And the reason is that, look, if you have a very high degree of empathy, it's very highly likely that you will think more about the pain that the customer is suffering, and figure out ways to solve that problem, whether those are known ways or new ways that need to be invented, right? So back in the days, when we started out on the train app, right? One of the pain areas we found in the whole market was that people would have to go to the official website to search for information, but either there was pretty difficult to find a UX UI where you couldn't look for information easily, or there were uh, reasons for that information not being accurate, right? So if you look at running status, the official website would update every 10-15 minutes and would not have the most accurate running status on where the train was. If you look at PNR status, you would have to go to the same website again and again, put the PNR number in, put the captcha in, and find out whether your wait list has moved or not. So back in 2013, when Android was still very young, we hacked together almost in a matter of a week or 10 days an app that sat on your phone, looked at all the IRCTC SMSs on your PNR inbox, and automatically, or what we used to call auto-magically, notified you whenever your waitlist movement changed. And similarly, when you were sitting inside a train, we were seamlessly using your location to help other users. And when you were trying to track a train, we were using their location to help you. And just these things, when we actually built them, there was no rationale for building them, right? So all OTAs globally have followed the template of launch flight first, then try to monetize from hotels, then spend money on marketing and scale, right? And here we found a hack which basically said, look, there is a very large number of people in the middle and bottom of the pyramid in India who have never taken a flight in their life. To be precise, 90% of Indians have never stepped inside an airport, right? Last year we had 120 million flyers, and that means there are, almost a billion people who have never stepped on a plane. But these people travel using trains. So if you have to build the biggest OTA in India, it has to be a train first OTA. How can somebody miss that? That's the insight we gained in 2013. Now, when we gained that insight, instead of launching with transactions, we said, what's the biggest problem train users face? And we said, the biggest problems are, I don't know what platform my train will come on. I don't know whether it's running on time. And I don't know whether my seat is confirmed, because 40% of people in India, when they book a train, they don't get a confirmed seat, right? And their wait list keeps moving and they have to check every 10 times a day, and just this insight gave us the Ixigo Train app, which today, by the way, gets more downloads in, actually, if you aggregate all other players in the category and you look at Ixigo Train app, we probably do more downloads than all other players in the travel category put together, right? And the only reason is that we solved for a real customer pain or real customer problem. And we didn't care about revenue back then. I mean, we didn't even know how to monetize it. I think when we discussed this idea with our investors, they said, hey, but these are, people who probably don't make a lot of money, how are you going to monetize from these guys? And we were like, we don't know, but we know that this is a real problem, right? And I think this attitude of trying to solve for the customer first and then we'll figure out monetization later is definitely something that has got us here. Um, the other thing I want to talk about is, how do you institutionalize a culture that that is built around experimentation, right? And the Train app was just one of the apps that we launched. There was one point of time where we had 6 apps out there. We've killed 4 of them. We now have 2 apps left, and one targeting the more evolved users with flights, and the one targeting the aspiring users, or the Bharat, or the next billion users, as Google calls them, with trains at the forefront. However, both these apps are full stack travel apps, right? So I think this difference in how we looked at the market, this difference in how we think the market will evolve over time, and the foresight of saying, look, the real action is going to be around next billion users, right? I think this came from experimentation, because had we not just built this app in a matter of a week or 10 days, in a hackathon, and just launched it out there and seen it grow to like 1 million downloads in 4 months, 5 months, we wouldn't even know that this thing works, right? So I think we've kept that now finally ingrained. Like, we do a lot of iterative stuff, but then we always, every quarter, push our engineers to say, hey, let's do something crazy. I mean, let's do something that sounds, like, it will change the life of consumers, and we don't care whether we're going to monetize from it or not. We'll figure that part out later, and most of the time we chance upon our next big idea that way.
And that's why you keep in your LinkedIn bio pursuing PhD in survival sciences.
Yeah, um, I think we've been pursuing that PhD for a while now. Um, Look, I think someone told me that success is failing to fail, right? And I think it's easier said than done, right? So there's definitely some science to this, and the science of this survival science is very simple. That one thing that incumbents, or traditional companies do very poorly is bet on ideas which have very little monetization on day one. So the way we look at innovation is that innovation is about doing things which basically look like very low ROI on day one, right? So those things will look like, hey, why should we even be doing this? But which can over time become who you are, right? And our Train app is an example, but there are many other things we're doing right now which fall into that. So I think survival is all about just uh, finding a way forward without having even the resources to do it. And whether it's on marketing, so again, going back to what we were talking about, which was our frugal marketing and what we did. So um, there was a time I remember where we went down to zero budget on marketing. I was interviewing someone in our early days for our marketing team, and he asked me, "So what's your marketing budget like?" And I said, "It's zero, right?" And he said, "You're kidding me, right?" Like, I said, "No, it's really zero. We don't have money to market, right? But we got to figure out ways to market." And so I think what happened there was that the moment you don't have the classical playbook or the classical resources that you need to solve any problem, that's, I think, when you are pushed towards more ingenuous solutions. So we started focusing a lot on ranking well on Google, ranking well on the Play Store, ASO, SEO, and then looking at content marketing. How do you appear at relevant places on the web without having to spend money? And then there was social media that came up. So there was like Facebook. That when Facebook came, exigo was one of the first brands to start doing some very quirky travel quizzes on Facebook back in the days. And we used to get massive engagement, even though Facebook had like 20-30 million users in India back then. And over time, once we started doing video, this whole thing went crazy, because we got like there would be videos that would get like 10,000, 50,000 shares, right? And shares is the only currency that matters. Views and likes and all that really doesn't matter, right? So the moment we saw that happening, we doubled down on that. And I think this teaches a story that survival is about trying to continuously innovate with whatever limited resources you have, because some of those are going to get you out to the next orbit, right? So there's a lot of people who talk about S curves, right? So you have every time you discover a new way to kind of grow your business to ride another S curve. And I think if I look at my story, Ixigo story, we've been riding a lot of these S curves time to time, and the only way you can ride them is, a part of your team has to constantly think about disrupting the status quo of your business or your industry all the time, because there's a incremental growth, but incremental growth never gets you to 10x or 20x, right? Incremental growth gets you to 2x. You always have to have some time, energy spent on what is it that makes me more I would say anti-fragile, right, in the long term.
And you have done various experiments, as you said. So one of the experiments, I believe, was Travel News. So I had interacted with GC Molly a few months back, and he shared that Travel News was built from grounds up, B2B, and it recently got acquired by SpiceJet. So tell us more about that experiment.
Yes. So a couple of years back, we had this insight again after talking to airlines and after seeing the state of the art on airline technology, that one of the reasons why airlines in India and many parts of the world have not been able to grow their direct bookings is because the customer experience of their apps or their websites have not been at par with what the OTAs have actually built, right? And obviously they do have the intent to get there, because every LCC in the world wants to become their own kind of portal slash e-commerce destination, but they don't have enough traffic because they've not really invested enough on the technology, the product, the user experience, and the marketing intelligence that is required to be built on top of that growth engine. Because look, DNA wise, airlines are airlines, they run planes, right? And then product and tech companies like ours are good at product and tech, right? uh, but the thing is that airlines would usually use like service companies or IT service providers who would build specification led solutions, and then there would be clunky integrations across 10 different systems of that sort, and things would just be running for decades, and people would say, don't touch this, right? So Rajneesh and I both worked for Amadeus before, which was one of the large travel technology companies that powered airlines to sell online. And one thing we'd seen was that, look, airlines don't mind spending on technology if they believe that's going to improve their direct sales. And with that premise, we talked to a few airlines to see if we could use the know-how that we had built at Ixigo to improve the overall sales, direct selling experience, that airlines have. Because ancillary revenue, which is a very large contributor to airline bottom lines, can only grow, once airlines figure out how to sell that stuff themselves, right? I mean, you can't rely on third parties all the time. It would also be a great, again, on the anti-fragility side, it'd be a great diversification for our business, because, we would be able to tap into a B2B technology industry, which is billions of dollars worth globally. Airlines, large airlines spend a lot of money on IT. And so we had this dream of building, one could call it like a Shopify for airlines, right? Which would be a dream platform that could run the app, website, and marketing automation for airlines, ancillary upsell, cross sell across hundreds of APIs that you could integrate across transportation, hospitality, etc. So we embarked on building that. Molly was leading that team. It was a separate entity based out of Bangalore. We had about 14, 15 people. We got SpiceJet as our first customer. We built something beautiful for them. It's already live on their app and web, and app and mobile web. I think the web desktop goes live anytime now. But the best part is we built this secular middleware that airlines could use to work with any third-party API, whether it was a GDS, whether it was a cab company, hotel company, and they could just cross-sell, upsell beautifully with that. Um, Unfortunately, with COVID coming, we realized that we should maybe focus just on one business at this point, and the one which made more sense to focus on was obviously the core. So we basically hived off the travel news team and technology, to SpiceJet, who was acquired, the team, and we've decided to not do B2B for the moment because we think the airline industry is going to take a very very long time globally to maybe a couple of years to get back into investment mode, right? Because they're kind of in survival mode for that while. So it makes more sense to focus back on our own core business for now.
So Alok, tell me throughout all these years, so to do experimentations and then to do away with some experiments and keep on doing those which worked would require tremendous amount of objectivity. How do you do that as an entrepreneur? Because entrepreneurship is all about passion and resilience and not giving up.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's very hard. I mean, it's not like it's not easy even for us to kill some of the things that don't work, because recognizing that they're not working is the hard part, right? And that's where you need the objectivity that you talked about. But I think for the experimentation itself, I think objectivity is uh, actually something that kills some of that and not helps there, because most of the disruptive ideas in the world did not come without thinking outside the box, and therefore running an Excel sheet or doing some data crunching from a big data system would never have thrown up those insights. So I think I'm a big believer that you can do a lot of iterative growth doing all of that. So you should have your own data science engineers who are constantly figuring out those experiments and A/B tests and iterative ideas. Uh, but for disruptive growth or for the S curve that I talked about, you need to bet more with your gut instinct, or people call it intuition, which and to build that muscle, largely gotta read and try a lot of things, and you also need to talk to a lot of users, right? I think that's one thing I encourage everyone in my team to do. Once a month, pick up the phone, talk to a user, right? And even till this day, I've been personally replying to some of the customer queries that keep coming. That now that we've grown, there are tons of them every day. So we try to encourage everyone in the team to spend at least one day every quarter, working on customer support or customer experience, because it's a way to get more insights. In fact, we did this week where almost everybody in our team was actually trained to actually do customer support. During the COVID crisis, there was a moment of time where a very large part of the team was actually helping out the customer support team because just the influx of queries was insane. And I think doing that throws up so many ideas because the market is out there telling you what works for them, what doesn't. And sometimes they can't tell you what product will make it work, but as a product or engineer guy, you can actually uh, visualize the solution the moment you hear the problem, right? I think knowing the problem, and articulating the problem is where you need to spend your energies on as a leader in a growth stage company.
And Alok, you shared about the fundraising journey which you had in 2009. The term sheet got pulled away, and then you turned you know almost profitable back then, so that your employee salaries could be met by the revenues. How has the post that the fundraising journey been with Make My Trip coming on board, and then SAF and Sequoia?
Yeah, so I think it was never easy in our journey. Like I still remember that the first 1 year of after launching exigo, I was literally on the road most of the time fundraising. There were not that many early stage investors back then. There's probably like 20 or 30 of them, and I'd met almost all of them, and most of them had said no, right? So it was very hard in the early days. Also because we were not following the OTA playbook, we were a meta search, and I think the thing about VCs is that at least back then, even more than now, is that if you're not doing something out of a regular playbook that worked elsewhere, it was harder to build conviction without seeing more traction, right? So I think must have knocked like at least 100 doors, and done quite a few meetings all across the country. And I think over time, as we grew, the inbound interest started to come. So I think the Series A round happened primarily due to inbound interest, as opposed to us going out and raising, because we had almost broken even, turned profitable. We were growing very fast year on year, almost doubling year on year, without any capital, right? So, we got inbound, and SAFE and MMT invested there. For the 2017 round with Sequoia and Fosun, Series B round, I think the year before that was a very tough year for us, because we were just pivoting away from Meta into Marketplace, which brought its own challenges, payments, and a lot of new things that we had to deal with. So even though we had a lot of traffic, we had very little monetization still to show for it, because we were still trying to get the business model right on the new pivot. Um, but I think what really helps, in fundraising is, I tell people that when you are pitching to investors, they may or may not invest, but the impression they carry about you is what matters more, because they may come back and invest later, right? So in Sequoia back in the days, obviously had said no, but in 2017 they saw the kind of traffic we built organically, right? I mean, we were at like 10, 12 million monthly active users, I think, uh, built without spending even like $5 million on marketing over the last 6, 7 years, right? So I think that was the impressive part there, and that really helped. And of course, they saw the potential for monetization. So at that time, I think we were doing hardly 20 crores in revenue. So the potential for monetization with that much traffic was evident. Fosun also came alongside Sequoia in that round. So the way I look at fundraising is simple. That look, it's just fuel for the road, right? I mean, you're driving a car. You need to reach a destination. Your destination in your mind might be a vision you want to fulfill, or an outcome, an IPO, or you want to take the company to a certain valuation. Investors are coming in and helping you fill your gas tank. I think it's up to you to actually be more efficient with that car, right? And make sure it's driving in the right direction at the right velocity, right? And so I think the way to look at this entire journey is that you've got to be very prudent about whatever you raise. Where is that going to take you, right? And we've been extremely capital efficient, and some people feel we've been maybe too like at times you'd have folks in marketing complain that, look, those guys are running crazy discounts, why can't we do that? And we used to say no, right? We used to say, look, if we have healthy unit economics, even if we grow slower, we're fine with it, right? And I think sometimes you have to have that discipline in the team, in order to build a more efficient, more capital efficient business. I think in COVID times, it's kind of helping us, because this kind of philosophy sounds maybe more sexy right now than it did 2 years ago when everybody was in hyper growth mode. But end of the day, that's the most prudent way to build value, because ultimately, whether you raise $10 million or $1 billion, right? Your prerogative as an entrepreneur is to return that capital, or multiples of that capital, to back to the investors. If you are not being prudent with it, it's very, very likely that you'll end up in a spot where you'll not be able to do that, right? So no matter what the scale, I think it's better. India is a market where, by the way, you can be as patient as possible, because 10 years ago, people came in with a thesis that in 5 years we'll have 50 unicorns. I think every time I hear this, I'm like, dude, it's going to take 10 more years than what people imagine. But the thing is, this will be the largest market in terms of unicorns in the world when that happens, right? Uh, and I think the patience and the fact that there are certain investors who understand that patience, and there are some who want to, do that in 2 years or 3 years. You've got to choose carefully what kind of investors you have, right? So we're thankful that we found investors who have a lot of patience in terms of how we are building this. We view this more like a marathon, not like a 100-meter race. And I always say that business is an infinite game, right? So even if you win in a marathon, even if you are winning the first lap, it doesn't mean anything, right? So you got to keep that consistency in what you do year on year, and build it as a core cultural value. So now for us, frugality comes naturally, right? I mean, doing marketing in a different way comes naturally. Being more product and customer oriented comes naturally. But in the early days, it was by design. Like, we had to really push people to do that, and we have to say no to a lot of ideas, right? I mean, that's what strategy is all about. If you say yes to everything, you don't have a strategy. But we used to say no to a lot of things, and that's how we ended up here.
Fantastic, Alok. And I believe you're already at 8x in terms of the revenue and hopefully the valuation at which you raised from the time you raised the last round in 2017. So, what's the destination for you now? You mentioned fundraise being a fuel to the destination.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one thing that is frustrating in the travel market is that if you look at the uh, degree of customer experience that's prevalent out there, and I'm talking about the whole nine yards, from the user experience pre-booking to the customer service provided post-booking. I think as an industry, globally, OTAs have failed, right? And I say this despite being an OTA for the last 1 year, and we are probably the newest OTA on the block, and maybe that's why I don't mind saying this, because we haven't really even done most of what we want to do in this OTA side of the business. But the fact is that you look at e-commerce, you look at many other verticals. There are companies you admire because they have built this very reliable and repeatable customer experience engine, right? Where that as a customer, you're always going to be dealt with in a certain manner, and you will have a predictable outcome when you go with a problem. In the travel industry, unfortunately, right, and it could be because of all the stakeholders, not the OTAs, but even the suppliers themselves. Whether it is about cancellation policies, whether it is about the additional service charges, convenience fees, whether it is about what is going to be included, what is not going to be included. This is not a space that has been very transparent with their users, right? This is not a space where people have actually taken calls proactively, which help their customers, right? And I think historically this could have been the case, because just like when you visit a new destination as a tourist, there are certain people who are willing to shortchange you, because it's a one-time transaction. Like, you're probably never going to go back to a shop again, anyways, right? And I think historically, travel agents used to deal with their customer that way. But in the new reality of the online world, like, if you want to build a large scalable brand, I think our philosophy is that we need to become the best at customer experience in this space, right? And we are not going to say we have achieved anything till we get there, right? So at this point, our single minded mission is we need to become the most loved OTA in the Indian market, within the next 1 to 2 years, right? I mean, that's our immediate next destination. And I'm saying most loved because being the largest or the biggest or the most valuable, etc., doesn't mean anything. If customers don't have organic love for you, right? I think we are not there yet ourselves, but because we are just 1 year old in the OTA game. But we have the vision and the I think the passion to get there as a team. We are going to we've already done many things that other OTAs who've been around for 10 years haven't done in the last 1 year. We've already proactively, so I'll give you a few examples. Pre-lockdown, for all the international bookings that were done in the month of March or April, we did not wait for the airlines to refund the money to us. In the month of March, for people who cancelled, we gave them the refund immediately. For some of those, we are still fighting with the airlines, but we chose to do that because that was the right thing to do for our customers, right? And by doing that, I think we've built amazing trust. Many of those people have come back and said they'll never go to any other OTA again, right? During this lockdown and post that, if the airline has cancelled their flight, because many of the airlines did not, also fly, even though they promised to, post the lockdown. there were OTAs that were not refunding the convenience fees, right? And we feel that's unethical, right? Because if the airline is giving a full refund, we have to give back the convenience fees. So we started to do that. These are very small things. Like you will see, on many OTAs when you try to book a flight, the price changes on the last step, right? Just before you're making a payment. Now, how hard is it to prevent that, right? So, small things that we are investing our time and energy, on to improve the customer experience. And one of the big things that we have done is Tara, which is our AI chatbot, AI customer assistant, which today is handling, more than 80% of our chat queries. Tara also recognizes where it is failing as a AI and seamlessly transfers you to a human agent at that moment of time, right? Where you start getting frustrated and you're like, I need to speak to someone, and or you don't get what I'm saying, etc. So I think the journey of trying to become the most loved OTA is complex, but we'll get there. It's a matter of a year or two. Um, and once we've gotten there, I think the rest of the stuff will sort itself out, whether it is growth or revenue or the other outcomes.
Alok, now coming towards the conclusion of the podcast, you are yourself an investor in 20 plus startups. How do
Right.
you approach uh, uh, this hat of angel investing?
Yeah. So I think once I'd reached the Series B kind of stage, right? I was seeing that a lot of entrepreneurs were approaching me for help with their startups, mentorship ideas, and actually I love doing that. So one of the things is, in my early years, there were very few people who actually gave me time to mentor me or help me out, right? And we were bootstrapped for very long, right? So you can imagine that I don't think many companies have bootstrapped for 5 years before their Series A, right? But that's what we did, right? Now, in those days, uh, you know, I still remember each and every guy who helped me. And one of the things I told myself was, if I am successful someday, if I reach a certain stage, I'm going to start giving back, right, in some shape and form. I believe that, if I am giving someone advice or ideas, um, I would be more vested in that conversation, if I really love that startup, to actually also angel invest in them and take a small stake, because that aligns the incentive for me to also spend my time on that. And so most of the time these are people who approach me to discuss some ideas, and then if I really like their idea, or like what they're doing, their startup, I do commit a small amount of. I'm not a big ticket investor, but I do believe that maybe my backing gives them the moral, courage to go and raise more money. So I've been doing that at the very early stage, like the first check typically, or like syndicate of the first syndicate. Most of these guys have actually, you know, been very bootstrapped kind of, like people who have started with very little capital, coming from humble backgrounds, middle class, kind of entrepreneurs. And so far, the journey has been interesting. There's been a few exits. There's been obviously a few shutdowns as well. But I think there's been a lot of learning on both sides, and there's been at least a feeling that I'm giving back to the ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Alok. It was wonderful to have you. Thank you again for sharing your experience, your wisdom, and all your experiences and experiments with us.
Thank you so much for having me again.